busy restaurant turns silent when a proud black waitress faces open humiliation. The manager's arrogance burns through the air, unaware that a pair of sharp eyes in a corner booth are watching closely. It started on a Friday night, the kind of night when the restaurant's chandeliers gleamed like tiny suns and every table was full of laughter, chatter, and the clinking of wine glasses. Tanya. The voice cracked across the room, cutting through the music. Every head turned. At the far end of the restaurant, Mr. Blake, the tall, red-faced manager in a white suit and gold tie, was waving a hand angrily. Standing by the counter, Tanya, a black waitress in her late 20s, froze mid-step, holding a tray of desserts. "Sir?" she asked softly, careful not to sound shaken. Blake's voice rose again. "Don't sir me. You think I didn't see that spill near table 4? You embarrassed this restaurant in front of our VIP guests." The crowd went quiet. The jazz band stopped playing. Tanya's hands trembled, but her posture remained calm, upright, respectful, unbroken. "I already cleaned it up, Mr. Blake," she said quietly. "The couple is fine." "I apologized." Blake's lip curled. "Apologized? You think that's enough? You've been sloppy all week." He took a step closer, his cologne sharp and heavy in the air. "You know what? Come with me." Tanya blinked. "Sir, my tables. Now!" he snapped, his voice echoing off the marble walls. The restaurant watched in stunned silence as Blake grabbed Tanya's arm and dragged her toward the hallway, the one that led to the bathrooms. Her tray clattered on the floor, chocolate mousse and glass splinters scattered across the polished tiles. A whisper rolled through the room like a chill wind. "Did he just drag her?" Someone muttered. "Man, that's messed up." Another said under their breath. Tanya didn't resist. Her eyes were steady, though her jaw tightened. She could feel every eye on her back, every judgment, every unspoken word. As the door to the restroom slammed behind them, a heavy silence fell over the diners. But at one corner table, hidden partly in the shadows, a man in a dark gray suit slowly placed his wineglass down. His eyes, cold, calculating, dangerous, followed the path where Tanya had just been pulled. He didn't move right away. He just watched, the corner of his jaw tightening. Nobody knew who he was, just that the staff whispered about him when he came in. The quiet man who always tipped in cash. Inside the restroom, Blake's voice roared again. "I told you, Tanya, this isn't some street diner. This is my restaurant, and I will not have some untrained what?" Tanya asked softly. The calm in her voice made him falter for half a second. Her eyes didn't flinch. Blake stepped closer until the smell of wine on his breath filled the air. "You heard me. You people come in here thinking you can say it," Tanya whispered, his face twisted. "He didn't, not yet. Clean that mess up. Now, I don't care how long it takes." He shoved a cleaning rag toward her. It fell to the floor between them. Tanya stared at it. Then she slowly knelt, not because of his order, but to keep herself composed. She began wiping the floor silently, her movements graceful despite the humiliation. Blake stood over her like a victor watching his prize. But what neither of them knew was that a security camera, half hidden in the corner of the ceiling, captured every second of the scene. The shove, the tone, the insult, and out in the dining hall, the man in the gray suit finally rose. He adjusted his cufflinks. He whispered something to the waiter as he passed by. "Tell your manager. His night's about to change." The waiter blinked, confused, but the man didn't wait for a reply. He was already moving toward the hallway, slow, deliberate, the faintest smirk curving his lips. Inside, Tanya was still kneeling when the door creaked open. Blake spun around. The man stepped in, silent as smoke. Blake frowned. "Sir, this area is for staff only." The man's voice cut him off. Deep, controlled. "She is the staff. You, on the other hand." Air finished. Blake's mouth opened, but no sound came. There was something about that man's eyes, calm but deadly. He didn't shout. He didn't move fast. He just stood there, his gaze locking Blake in place. The air grew thick. Tanya rose slowly, her eyes wide. Who are you? Blake stammered. The man took one step forward, his shoes clicking softly on the tiles. The last man, he said. You ever wanted to see treating my wife like that? Silence. Blake froze, color draining from his face. Tanya's hand flew to her mouth. Then the man smiled faintly, almost pitying. The arrogant manager stands face to face with the woman's mysterious husband, unaware he's just provoked the one man whose name can silence an entire city. The fluorescent light in the restroom buzzed faintly. The only sound after that deadly silence. Mr. Blake stood frozen, his throat tight. The tall man in the gray suit didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His presence filled the room like a shadow swallowing everything else. Tanya's breath caught. Michael, she whispered. He turned to her, his tone softening for the first time. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here now. Blake blinked. Sweetheart? His eyes darted between them. Wait, you two know each other? Michael's calm stare didn't waver. She's my wife. The words dropped like thunder. Outside, through the half-open door, a waitress passing by froze mid-step. The whisper began instantly. Her husband's here. Who? I don't know, but he looks dangerous. Blake's face twisted. I didn't know. She never said. Michael tilted his head slightly. Does she need to tell you she's married before you decide whether to humiliate her? I didn't humiliate. Look, it was a misunderstanding. Blake stammered, his hand shaking now. Michael took a single step forward. Blake instinctively stepped back until he hit the sink behind him. The air thickened. Tanya watched quietly, her eyes calm, but her chest rising with held emotion. Michael's tone dropped lower. Do you make a habit of dragging women into bathrooms when you're angry, Mr. Blake? Blake's voice cracked. No. I just wanted to talk privately, that's all. Michael's eyebrow arched. Talk privately? Or intimidate her where no one could see you? There it was, the truth, sharp and cold. Blake's lips parted, but no sound came out. Outside, whispers rippled through the restaurant. Waiters stopped serving. Guests leaned in. Something's going down in there. Who is that man? He looks like he owns the place. Then one of the older waiters, a man who'd worked there for 20 years, whispered the words. That froze the air. That's Michael Raines. The name spread like fire from table to table. Raines? The Raines? You mean the guy from the east side? The one who runs? Don't even say it. Inside, Blake caught the look of fear that flashed through the waiter's eyes. He turned back to Michael, suddenly pale. You're that Raines? Michael didn't confirm. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. He looked down at Tanya, still standing with quiet dignity. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You okay? Tanya nodded softly. I'm fine now. Michael's hand lingered on her shoulder, a small, protective gesture that radiated power. Then he turned back to Blake. His voice was even calm, too calm. You're going to apologize. Blake swallowed hard. Of course, I'm sorry, Mrs. Raines. I didn't mean to offend. Michael's eyes narrowed. Not like that. He stepped closer until Blake could smell the faint cologne. Something expensive, subtle, unmistakably dangerous. Apologize, he repeated. From your knees. The words struck Blake like ice water. What? No, sir, please. There are people. Michael leaned in slightly, voice dropping to a whisper that felt more like a threat than a shout. You didn't care who was watching when you dragged her. Now you'll show her the same attention while you make it right. Tanya shook her head gently. Michael. It's okay. He's not worth. Michael looked at her, his eyes softening again. It's not about him being worth it. It's about the world seeing the difference between respect and humiliation. For a long second, Blake didn't move. His pride warred with fear, and fear won. Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee on the cold tile floor. His voice trembled. Mrs. Raines. I'm sorry for the way I spoke to you. I shouldn't have raised my hand or my voice. Tanya looked down at him, pain flickering in her eyes. I forgive you, she said quietly. Not for him, but for her own peace. Michael gave a slight nod. Now stand up. You're done here. Blake blinked. Done? You can't fire me. You don't even... Michael's faint smile cut him off. I already called your boss. Blake's face twisted in confusion. You what? Michael turned toward the door. The owner's an old friend. You should expect a call within 5 minutes. Blake's mouth hung open. Wait, please, this is my career. Michael paused by the door. Then you should have thought about that before you used your power to humiliate someone who couldn't fight back. He opened the door and gestured for Tanya to walk out first. She did, gracefully, head held high. As they stepped back into the dining hall, the room fell into stunned silence. Every guest watched them pass. Michael wrapped an arm gently around Tanya's waist. Blake appeared in the doorway behind them, trembling, eyes wide with disbelief. At that moment, the restaurant phone rang at the counter. The hostess picked it up, then turned pale. She looked toward Blake. It's the owner, she said softly. The color drained from Blake's face. Michael didn't look back. He guided Tanya toward the exit, each step echoing like a heartbeat through the silent room. As the door closed behind them, someone whispered from the bar, "So that's the man who runs the city." As Blake answers the call that seals his fate, Michael and Tanya step into the night, but someone else is already waiting outside. Watching from the shadows, the night air hit Tanya's face like a breath of freedom, cool, steady and strangely quiet after the chaos inside. The soft hum of traffic echoed from the main road, mixed with the faint buzz of the neon sign above the restaurant door, La Bristo. Michael walked beside her in silence for a few steps. His arm still rested protectively around her, steady and sure. Tanya finally exhaled, her voice low. You didn't have to do all that, Michael. He gave a small smile. I didn't have to know. But someone had to remind that man what respect looks like. Tanya looked at him, the glow of the parking lot lamps reflecting in her eyes. You scared everyone in there. Michael smirked softly. Good. Fear makes people remember their manners. They reached his car, a sleek black sedan that looked ordinary enough until the engine's soft purr revealed its power. He opened the door for her, but Tanya didn't step in right away. She looked back at the restaurant. Through the glass doors, she could see Blake on the phone, pacing frantically. The hostess stood nearby, pale as chalk. Do you think he'll actually get fired? She asked quietly. Michael's eyes followed hers. He already did. By now, the owners told him to hand over his keys. Tanya sighed. I didn't want it to end like that. I just wanted to be treated like everyone else. Michael's tone softened. And you will be. But sometimes, people don't learn until the ground under them shakes. She nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. Just then, a faint click echoed from somewhere behind the cars. Subtle, metallic, almost lost under the hum of streetlights. Michael's head turned instantly. Get in the car, he said quietly. Tanya froze. What is it? Now? His tone changed. The soft, calm husband vanished. The calculating man returned. She obeyed, sliding into the passenger seat. Michael closed the door gently, his movements controlled, eyes scanning the lot. A flicker. A shadow moved near the dumpster by the far corner. Someone was there. Watching. Michael walked casually toward the trunk, pretending to check something inside. But his reflection in the chrome bumper gave him the angle he needed. A figure stood half-hidden, holding up a phone. Camera light off, but the faint red. Recording. Visible in the dark. Michael's jaw tightened. He pressed the trunk closed with one hand, then turned sharply. Come out, he said, calm, commanding. No response. I said come out. A pause. Then the figure stepped forward. A young man, maybe mid-20s, wearing a server's apron. His hands trembled slightly as he held the phone. I wasn't doing anything. Sir, the man stammered. Michael's tone stayed level. You've been recording since we walked out. The waiter swallowed hard. The manager told me to get proof. He said you threatened him. I didn't mean to. Proof? Michael echoed. Interesting word. You mean the part where he dragged my wife into a bathroom? The waiter hesitated, lowering his phone slightly. I didn't know what he did, sir. I need this job. Michael studied him quietly. The young man's fear wasn't arrogance, it was desperation. His shirt was worn, shoes old, eyes tired. What's your name? Michael asked. Daryl. Michael's tone softened just a little. Daryl, do yourself a favor. Walk back inside. Tell your boss you lost the footage. Then go home. Daryl blinked. He'll fire me if I... Michael stepped closer, his presence making the air colder. He's already fired. And you don't want to tie your future to a sinking ship. The waiter hesitated, then nodded, pocketing his phone. Yes, sir. He turned and hurried toward the restaurant, glancing back once before disappearing inside. Michael waited until the door shut, then looked around the lot again. The silence returned, but something about it felt. Off he walked back to the car. Tanya watched him through the window, concern etched across her face. What was that about? Michael slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. Just someone making a mistake. It's handled. But even as he said it, his eyes flicked toward the rearview mirror. Across the street, parked under a broken streetlight, a dark SUV sat idle. No headlights, just a faint blue glow from a phone screen inside. A figure in the SUV lifted a walkie-talkie to his mouth. He's on the move. The voice crackled quietly. Confirm, Michael Raines, accompanied by female, exiting La Bristow now. Michael's jaw clenched again. He hadn't seen that face before, which meant someone new had entered the game. Tanya noticed his silence. Michael. What's wrong? He forced a smile. Nothing, sweetheart. Just thinking about dessert. But his hand gripped the steering wheel tighter than before. As the car rolled out of the parking lot. The SUV's engine came to life. Its headlights stayed off. From above, a camera on a nearby building blinked red, recording every second, their license plate, the direction they turned. The world that thought it could quietly watch the man no one dared to cross. Michael thinks he's silenced one threat, unaware that someone far more dangerous is tracking his every move, and this time, it's not about Tanya, but his past. The drive home was silent, too silent. The soft hum of the car's engine barely broke the tension sitting between them. Streetlights flashed across the windshield, slicing Michael's face into light and shadow. Tanya finally spoke. You're not telling me something. Michael kept his eyes on the road. You don't need to worry about it. Michael, she said softly but firmly. That tone only comes out when something's wrong. He hesitated. His jaw moved like he was chewing words before letting them go. Someone was watching us. Not just the waiter, someone else. Tanya frowned. From the restaurant? Maybe, maybe not. His voice lowered. But whoever it was, they weren't watching you. They were watching me. The words hung between them, heavy as the night. Tanya turned to face him. Because of who you used to be. Michael's hand tightened on the wheel. Because of who I still am. To some people. The car turned into a quiet neighborhood. Wide lawns, old oak trees. The kind of street that looked peaceful until you listened closely enough to hear the secrets behind the fences. As they pulled into the driveway, Michael scanned the street before cutting the engine. The silence felt like a presence of its own. Tanya rested a hand on his arm. We're safe here, right? He looked at her. His expression softened. Always. No one touches you while I'm breathing. They went inside. The house smelled faintly of jasmine, Tanya's candle still burning from earlier. She slipped off her shoes, walked straight to the kitchen, and began making tea, her way of grounding herself. Michael stood by the window, pulling out his phone. A single message blinked on the screen. Unknown. Didn't expect to see you in public again. Raines. Michael stared at it for a moment. Then another came. Unknown. You've been quiet for too long. Some of us were starting to think you were gone. He exhaled slowly, deleting both messages before Tanya could see. In the kitchen, she stirred sugar into her cup. Who was it? Wrong number, he said casually, but his mind was already racing. Only one group would dare message him like that. The people he'd walked away from years ago when he promised Tanya a new life. The Sable Ring, they weren't a gang. They were older, colder, smarter, The kind of people who didn't shout or threaten. They erased, bribed, controlled. They were the shadow network behind the city's most respectable institutions. Michael had been one of their best until he disappeared. Now, someone wanted him back. At the same time, across town, a small group sat in a dimly lit office above an old pawn shop. Cigarette smoke curled through the air. A man with slicked back hair scrolled through photos on a tablet. Grainy security footage from outside the restaurant. "So that's him?" one voice said from the corner. "Michael Raines. Been off the grid for 5 years." The man with the tablet smirked. "Not anymore." Another voice, older, colder, spoke from behind a desk. "Does he know we're watching?" "Not yet." "Good. Keep it that way. For now." The older man leaned forward, tapping one image on the screen. Michael's face half lit by a street lamp. "He embarrassed the wrong person tonight," he said. "Blake was one of ours. We placed him in that restaurant for a reason." The younger man frowned. "He was just a manager." The boss smiled faintly. "Nothing in this city is just anything." He turned to the window, the streetlights painting his outline in gold. "Find out how much Tanya knows. And make sure Michael understands he doesn't get to walk away twice." Back at the Raines home, Tanya carried 2 cups of tea into the living room. Michael sat on the couch, deep in thought, his phone now dark and silent. She handed him a cup. "You've got that look again." He smiled faintly. "What look?" "The one that says you're planning 10 steps ahead." He took the cup, the warmth grounding him for a second. "Old habits." Tanya sat beside him. "You don't have to protect me from everything, you know? I can handle the truth." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You remember when we moved here? I told you I was done with that life." She nodded. Double quotes. "Well," he continued, voice dropping lower, "someone out there doesn't believe me." Before she could respond, a faint ping sounded from the front door, the small security chime that only went off when a motion sensor picked something up. Michael's head turned instantly. Tanya froze. "Was that?" He put a finger to his lips. "Stay here." He stood, moving silently toward the hallway. Each step was calculated, precise. He reached the front door and peeked through the narrow glass pane. At first, nothing. Just darkness. Then, the faint red light of a camera across the street. Someone was recording. Again. He unlocked the door quietly and stepped out onto the porch, eyes narrowing. The red light blinked once. Then it vanished. He stood there in the still night, the sound of crickets filling the air, and underneath that, faintly, the distant growl of an idling engine that never shut off. Michael whispered to himself. So it begins again. Michael realizes the past he buried has resurfaced, and the people watching him tonight aren't after revenge. They're after control. Rain poured in thick sheets that morning, turning the city streets into shimmering mirrors. Outside the hospital, police cruisers lined the front entrance. Their red and blue lights reflected off puddles like some distorted, twisted version of justice. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The whispers had grown louder overnight. Everyone knew something big was coming. Nurse Maya walked through the hall, her eyes red from lack of sleep. The world seemed heavier now, every step echoing against the marble floors. She had spent most of the night comforting Mr. Daniel's wife, who hadn't stopped crying since the shooting. The hospital corridors that once felt like a place of healing now felt like a courtroom. Every look, every word, a judgment. In the corner of the lobby, Officer Paul Reynolds, the shooter, sat with his partner, Detective Miller. His leg bounced nervously. The man who once barked orders now couldn't meet anyone's eyes. He had told everyone that the shooting was a clean mistake, but the evidence had turned against him. The security footage, the witness statements, and most of all, the shocking discovery of who the victim really was, all of it had broken his world apart. As the hospital doors opened, Captain James Carter, a tall, CALM black man in his early 50s, stepped in. His uniform gleamed, his posture straight as steel. The officers around him stiffened instantly. Everyone knew who he was, the most respected man in the department, known for his fairness and unshakable sense of justice. Paul swallowed hard. He hadn't slept since the captain called him in the night before. He looked up, trying to steady his voice. "Captain Carter." "Sir, I—" Carter raised a hand, silencing him. His voice was controlled but icy. "Officer Reynolds, before you say anything, I need to inform you that you are under internal investigation. I suggest you save your explanations for the hearing." Paul's throat tightened. "Sir, it wasn't what it looks like." That man, he reached for something. Carter's eyes locked on him, unblinking. "He reached for his ID, Officer Reynolds. His police ID. He was one of us." The lobby went silent. Every nurse, every doctor, every patient who overheard froze. Paul's lips parted, but no sound came out. His chest heaved as if the air itself had betrayed him. Carter took a step closer, his tone sharper now. "You shot Detective Henry Daniels, a veteran of this force, a man who spent 20 years serving this city. And you did it because you didn't see a fellow officer. You saw a black man in an expensive car." Paul's shoulders dropped. His hands trembled. I didn't know. That's the problem," Carter said, voice low. "You never wanted to know." The entire room felt it, the weight of that truth. Miller shifted uncomfortably beside his partner. He'd always known Paul had a short fuse, but this was different. He stood up, reaching for his badge. "Captain," Miller said quietly, "I think it's time." Carter nodded. "Officer Paul Reynolds, you are hereby suspended and placed under arrest pending investigation for the unlawful shooting of Detective Henry Daniels." Paul's eyes widened. "Wait, you can't arrest me here, in front of everyone." Carter's expression didn't change. "Justice doesn't hide behind closed doors." He nodded toward Miller. "Read him his rights." Miller hesitated for a heartbeat. Then, with a deep sigh, he turned to his own partner, the man he'd trusted for years, and began. "Paul Reynolds, you have the right to remain silent." Paul's voice cracked. "Miller, please." "You know me." "I didn't mean—" Miller's tone hardened. "I know what I saw, Paul, and I know what I didn't stop." As the cuffs clicked around Paul's wrists, the lobby erupted in murmurs. Some gasped. Others whispered things like "finally" and "about time." Nurse Maya stood near the reception desk. Tears in her eyes, but this time they weren't from sorrow. For the first time since the shooting, she felt something like justice beginning to breathe again. Carter turned to her. "Miss Maya," he said softly, "I know this doesn't bring your friend back to peace. But I promise you this won't be swept under the rug." She nodded, voice trembling. "Thank you, Captain. He didn't deserve this." Carter's jaw tightened. "No one does." As the officers led Paul out, the storm outside intensified. The wind howled through the open door, scattering papers across the floor like fragments of broken truth. Paul stumbled as the rain hit his face. Cameras flashed. Reporters had already arrived. His face, once proud, now looked small under the weight of shame and flashing lights dot in the background. Captain Carter stood firm under the awning, watching him go. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he whispered quietly to himself, "Henry, you deserved better than this." Behind him, Nurse Maya looked up. She saw the strength in Carter's eyes, and for the first time in days, she believed that maybe, just maybe, justice wasn't dead. The camera of fate slowly panned upward, rain falling. Sirens wailing and the city trembling between guilt and redemption. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the city still felt heavy. Clouds hung low over the skyline, and the world seemed to move slower, quieter, as if mourning what had been lost. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. Reporters had surrounded the building, and every channel in the city ran the same headline: "White officer arrested for shooting black detective." The story had gone national. But what the public didn't yet know was that there was still a missing piece. The footage dot in a small evidence room on the third floor. Detective Miller sat beside Captain Carter, staring at a laptop. The dim light reflected off the screen, casting a ghostly glow on their faces. Between them, the USB drive lay on the table, the hospital's security footage. Miller exhaled shakily. "Sir, are we sure we want to see this now?" Carter didn't look up. "Justice doesn't wait for comfort, Detective." He inserted the drive. The screen flickered. Then the image appeared, grainy but clear enough. The timestamp showed 11:43 a.m. on the day of the shooting. They watched silently as the footage rolled out. It showed Detective Henry Daniels, dressed in plain clothes, walking toward his car in the hospital parking lot. His steps were slow, tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from years of night shifts. He opened his door, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his wallet. A moment later, Paul Reynolds' patrol car screeched into frame. He jumped out, hand already on his weapon. "Hey! Hands where I can see them." Paul's voice echoed faintly through the security mic. Daniels froze, startled. He raised his left hand and turned slightly. "Officer, don't move." Paul barked. Daniels lowered his tone, calm and controlled. "I'm a detective. My badge is in my wallet." "Drop it." Daniels slowly began to pull out his ID. He held it up. "Look, right here." The next sound made both Carter and Miller flinch. "Bang." Daniels' single quotes body collapsed against the car, blood splattering the white door. The ID slid from his hand, landing inches from his face. Carter's jaw clenched. Miller's eyes welled up, his voice cracking. "God, he didn't resist." He showed him the badge. But the tape wasn't over. Paul walked up, gun still raised, breathing hard. He looked down at Daniel's body, then at the ID. For a moment, he froze. The camera zoomed in just enough to catch it, the way Paul's face drained of color, the panic setting in. He whispered something under his breath. Then, he kicked the ID under the car and turned back toward his cruiser, calling for backup. Miller slammed his fist against the table. "He hit it, Captain. He knew. He tried to bury the truth right there." Carter's voice was cold. "Now we have proof." The room fell silent again. Only the faint hum of the computer filled the air. Carter leaned back, rubbing his temples. He'd seen many kinds of evil in his career, but betrayal from within, that was the worst. Miller whispered, "Should we release it to the media?" Carter shook his head slowly. "Not yet. We'll send it to Internal Affairs first. It has to be official. No leaks. Justice must be clean, or it loses power." Miller nodded reluctantly. "Understood, sir." Just then, the door opened. Nurse Maya stood there, holding a file. She looked nervous. "Captain Carter?" "I have found something else." Carter turned. "What is it, Miss Maya?" She handed him a small envelope. One of the nurses from the ASHI said she found this in Daniel's locker. He left it the morning before the shooting. Carter opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note, slightly crumpled but clear. "If anything ever happens to me, tell my daughter I forgave them before it began. People like me don't die for nothing. We die to wake the world up." Henry Daniels. The room went still. Maya's voice trembled. He knew, he felt something might happen. Carter read the note again, this time slower. Then he folded it, placing it gently in his jacket pocket. "His daughter will see this. The world will see this. But first, the department will face it." Miller looked at Carter, uneasy. "Sir, what about the officer?" "Paul?" Carter stood, his expression grave. "He'll be tried for more than negligence now. That tape changes everything." He turned to Maya. "Miss Maya, thank you. You've done more for this case than most of us in uniform." Tears welled in her eyes. "I just want his family to know he wasn't alone." Carter nodded. "They will. I promise." He glanced one last time at the frozen frame on the laptop, Daniels lying motionless beside the car. The badge glinting beside his hand. Then he whispered, "The truth doesn't stay buried." "Henry, not anymore." The scene faded out as the storm clouds outside began to clear. Sunlight breaking through the gray. The morning air smelled like wet pavement and gasoline. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and police tried to hold back the crowd. The story of Detective Henry Daniels had spread far beyond the city now. The whole country was watching. A black sedan pulled up to the steps. The door opened slowly. A young woman stepped out, early 30s. Dressed in a black suit, her posture graceful but heavy with purpose. Her name was Alyssa Daniels, Henry's only daughter. The cameras turned instantly. "Miss Daniels, do you have a statement?" Are you here for the trial? Is it true you work for the federal task force? She ignored them all. Her expression stayed calm, eyes shielded behind dark sunglasses. But beneath that calm was a quiet storm. She climbed the courthouse steps one by one, heels tapping like a metronome against the concrete. Each step echoed her father's name in her mind, the man who had taught her patience, dignity, and courage. At the top, Captain Carter was waiting. He looked older than before, weary but respectful. "Alyssa," he said softly, "I didn't expect you this soon." She removed her glasses, her eyes glistening. "He was my father, Captain." "You didn't think I'd wait for an invitation, did you?" Carter sighed. "No, I didn't." They walked inside together. The marble hallway stretched ahead, silent, sterile, cold. Every echo of their footsteps seemed to carry the weight of justice yet to be done. Inside a small conference room, Detective Miller stood with files spread across the table. He looked up when Alyssa entered, his voice awkward but sincere. "Miss Daniels, I'm so sorry for your loss." She nodded politely. "Thank you, Detective. But right now, I'm not here to mourn. I'm here to understand." Carter handed her a copy of the internal report. "We've reviewed the footage. The case is moving fast. Internal Affairs is preparing to press full charges against Officer Reynolds." Alyssa flipped through the pages. Her eyes scanned the words like a blade cutting through paper. Then she stopped, frowning. "Accidental discharge?" She read aloud, voice cold. "You're still calling it that?" Miller swallowed hard. "That's what the DA's draft says for now." "But," she slammed the folder shut. "No, there's no but. He executed my father. You all saw the tape. He hid the badge. He left him there to die." Carter's voice stayed calm. "You're right. And that's why we're fighting to correct it. But this department moves like stone, Alyssa. Justice here doesn't run, it crawls." She looked at him, her voice trembling slightly. "Then we'll make it run." A pause. Then Carter asked, "What do you mean?" Alyssa leaned forward, lowering her tone. "I work for the Bureau. I've seen this pattern before, excessive force, then cover-up, then internal spin. But this time, we have evidence. And if you'll stand with me, Captain, I can take it straight to Washington." Miller blinked. "You're saying federal intervention?" She nodded. "Yes, if the state won't deliver justice, the feds will." Carter exhaled, rubbing his chin. "You realize that means war, right? Between this department and half the city council." Alyssa's eyes hardened. "Then let it be war." The room fell quiet again. Outside, the hum of the crowd grew louder. Chants, megaphones, anger, unity. The people were demanding change. Carter finally said, "Your father would have been proud of you." Alyssa looked down, her voice softer. "He always told me, dignity isn't silence, it's strength. I used to think he meant endure it. But now I understand, he meant stand up anyway." Miller cleared his throat. "Miss Daniels, there's something you should know. Your father left a note. He said he forgave them." Her eyes glistened again. "He always did. Even when the world didn't deserve it." Carter nodded solemnly. "We'll release the footage today. No more delays. The truth deserves daylight." Suddenly, the door burst open. A young officer rushed in, breathless. "Captain, you need to see this. It's Officer Reynolds." Carter frowned. "What about him?" He's checked himself out of the county hospital and disappeared. Left before the hearing." Alyssa's jaw tightened. "He ran," Miller muttered. "Coward knows what's coming." Carter grabbed his coat. "Put out an alert. I want every highway, every airport watching for him." The young officer nodded and dashed out. Alyssa turned to Carter. "He won't get far." Carter met her eyes. "You sound sure." "I am," she said, stepping closer to the window, staring out at the swelling protest below. "Because guilt doesn't hide for long. It rots from the inside until it bursts into the open." Her voice was calm, steady, powerful. Carter studied her for a moment, the same composure, the same quiet strength as her father. "You really are Henry's daughter," he murmured. She smiled faintly. And I'm not leaving until his name is cleared fully. Outside, the crowd's chant grew stronger, echoing through the streets. Justice for Daniels. Justice for Daniels. Alyssa closed her eyes for a moment, whispering to herself, "They'll know who he was, Dad. I promise." Then, a sudden buzz broke through the noise. Miller's phone lit up. He glanced at it. His face went pale. "Captain, Alyssa. You need to see this." Carter leaned over his shoulder. The screen showed a shaky cell phone video posted online. Officer Reynolds, standing at a gas station, pale and shaking, talking to someone off camera. His words were trembling. "I didn't mean to. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. They told me to." The video cut off abruptly. Alyssa's eyes narrowed. "He's talking. And if he's talking, someone's listening." Carter whispered, "This goes deeper than one officer." Alyssa turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Then it's time we find out who gave the order." The city hadn't slept. News vans still lined the courthouse streets, and protest signs swayed in the wind like restless ghosts. But inside Captain Carter's office, the mood was darker, quieter, the kind of silence that came before a storm. Alyssa Daniels stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the city below. Her voice was calm, but her jaw was tight. "You saw the video, Captain. Reynolds said someone told him to do it. That means there's a chain." Carter rubbed his temples. "We don't deal in rumors, Alyssa." "Neither did my father," she replied sharply. "But he died because someone else did." Detective Miller entered, holding a manila folder. "We pulled phone logs from Reynolds' service records. There's a call 5 minutes before the shooting. Came from an unlisted number inside the precinct." Carter looked up. "Inside our building?" "Yes, sir. We traced it to an extension belonging to Lieutenant Warren Briggs." Alyssa frowned. "Who's he?" Miller hesitated. "Second in command of the patrol division. 20 years on the force. Big reputation for keeping order." Carter's face hardened. "And he's been running the internal board since the shooting." "That means he's been covering his own tracks," Alyssa finished, her voice low and cold. Miller nodded. "We have no proof yet, but—" He opened the folder. "Here's something else. I checked Reynolds' financials. 2 days after the shooting, his wife's account received a $25,000 transfer from a private fund, listed as a consulting fee. Guess who authorized it?" Carter didn't answer. He didn't have to. Miller said it anyway. "Lieutenant Briggs." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the slow tick of the wall clock. Alyssa spoke first. "So the shooting wasn't just fear. It was orchestrated. My father wasn't a random target. He was a threat." Carter exhaled. "Your father was investigating corruption inside the department. Briggs was one of the names on his confidential list. That's why he went to the hospital, to meet a witness." Alyssa turned sharply. "A witness? You mean he had evidence?" Carter nodded. "Yes, but after his death, that evidence disappeared." Miller added, "And guess who was first on scene after Reynolds fired the shot?" Alyssa whispered, "Briggs." Her eyes flashed with rage, a kind of righteous fury her father would have recognized. "Then we're not waiting. We go to internal affairs. Tonight." Carter sighed. "You don't understand, Alyssa. Briggs has friends in the DA's office, the union, even the mayor's staff. If we go in blind, he'll bury us before sunrise." She stepped closer. "Then we go in smart." Her tone had that quiet confidence of someone who'd faced power before and refused to flinch. Carter watched her, then slowly smiled. "You've got your father's fire." She looked away, blinking back tears. "And his unfinished work." That night, the precinct felt like a graveyard. Dim corridors, flickering lights, the hum of old air vents. Carter, Miller, and Alyssa moved quietly through the hallway toward Briggs' office. Miller whispered, "Security's light tonight. He probably thinks everyone's focused on Reynolds." Carter stopped at the door. "Keep your cameras rolling. We do this by the book." Alyssa held up a small recording device. "Already live." Carter turned the knob slowly. The door creaked open. Inside, Lieutenant Briggs sat behind his desk, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside a stack of files. His gray hair was slicked back, his uniform crisp, a man used to control. He looked up, smirking. Well, Captain Carter, working overtime? And you brought company. Miss Daniels, isn't it? The grieving daughter. Alyssa's eyes didn't waver. You watched my father die. Then you hid the truth. Briggs chuckled. Careful with your words, ma'am. You're in a police building. Defamation's a serious offense. Carter stepped forward. So is murder. Briggs leaned back in his chair, unconcerned. Murder? That was a tragedy. A confused officer. Stress. Poor decision-making. Happens every day. Alyssa's voice cut through the air like ice. You called him before he fired. We have the records. For the first time, Briggs' smirk faltered. Barely. But enough for Carter to notice. I don't know what you think you're implying, Briggs said slowly. Miller set the folder down on the desk. $25,000 to Reynolds' wife. Direct link to your fund. You really thought no one would trace it? Briggs' hand twitched. You don't have proof of anything. Alyssa pressed the recorder closer. Say that again. Briggs glared at her, voice rising. You think you can walk in here and threaten me? I built this department. I trained men like your father, taught them how to stay alive. He got himself killed playing hero. The room went still. Alyssa whispered, No. He died because of you. Carter's voice was cold now. Warren Briggs, you're under investigation for obstruction, conspiracy, and misconduct in connection with the death of Detective Henry Daniels. Briggs shot to his feet. You don't have the authority. Carter raised his badge. I do. Before Briggs could move, two uniformed officers stepped in from the hall. Internal Affairs, summoned silently by Miller's text. They took Briggs by the arms. He struggled, shouting, You'll regret this. You all will. Alyssa stared at him, unflinching. The only thing I'll regret is not doing it sooner. As Briggs was let out, his voice echoed down the hallway. You don't know who you're dealing with. It goes higher than me. The words hung in the air long after he was gone. Carter turned to Alyssa. You hear that? She nodded. Yeah, which means we're not done yet. Outside thunder rolled again. But this time, the rain felt cleansing, not sorrowful. The city skyline looked calm that morning, almost peaceful, but Alyssa knew better. Beneath the surface, something dark was shifting. The arrest of Lieutenant Briggs had sent shockwaves through the entire department. Officers whispered in corners. Commanders refused interviews. And for the first time in years, fear wasn't just outside. It was inside the badge dot in Captain Carter's office. The blinds were drawn. A single lamp lit the room as Carter, Miller, and Alyssa reviewed new files spread across the table. Carter sighed. Briggs is denying everything. Claims the call logs were falsified. Alyssa shook her head. He's lying. And the way he shouted, it goes higher than me, he meant it. Miller tapped one file. We dug into the fund that paid Reynolds' wife. It's part of a larger account used for officer bonuses. You know who oversees it? Carter frowned. The chief? Miller nodded grimly. Chief Harold Donnelly. Carter leaned back, jaw tightening. That's impossible. Donnelly's been the face of reform for a decade. He built his whole career on racial unity. Alyssa's tone was sharp. Public image and private power are never the same thing, Captain. Miller flipped another page. Look at this. Weeks before your father was killed, Daniels filed a confidential report, flagged directly to the chief's office. He accused several senior officers of manipulating patrol assignments in minority neighborhoods, targeting specific demographics. Carter's voice dropped. And who signed off to close that report? Alyssa's eyes scanned the page. Case deemed unfounded. Closed by authority of Chief H. Donnelly. The room went still, she whispered. He killed it. Miller added, and when Daniels didn't back off, Briggs made sure he never got to file again. Carter rubbed his temples, his voice gravelly. This isn't just corruption. This is a system built to protect itself. Alyssa's jaw clenched. Then we break the system." That evening, they met in a diner on the edge of the city, one of those old places with flickering neon and coffee that tasted like burnt history. The place was nearly empty, just a waitress wiping down the counter and a lone man reading a newspaper by the window. Alyssa spoke softly. "If we go public with this without solid evidence, Donnelly will crush it. We need something undeniable." Miller nodded. "We've already seized Briggs' laptop. Digital forensics might dig out deleted messages, maybe encrypted files." Carter frowned. "That'll take time. And once Donnelly knows Briggs is in custody, he'll start cleaning house." Alyssa thought for a moment. "What if we don't wait for forensics? What if we make him reveal himself?" Carter looked at her curiously. "You've got a plan, don't you?" She smirked faintly. "My father taught me. The guilty always talk when they think they're safe." The next day, Alyssa requested a meeting with Chief Donnelly. Officially, it was to discuss her father's case. Unofficially, it was a trap. The chief's office was large, too large. Alyssa thought, with polished wood, gold plaques, and framed photos of smiling officers shaking hands with politicians. Donnelly stood when she entered, his smile professional but tight. "Miss Daniels, I've been expecting you. Thank you for meeting me, Chief." He gestured to the seat across from him. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss. Henry was one of the finest detectives we had. I was devastated when I heard." She sat, watching him carefully. "Were you?" His smile didn't waver. "Of course. I personally ensured Internal Affairs was investigating. We'll see justice done." Alyssa leaned forward slightly. "Funny you say that, because from what I've seen, justice was buried long before my father was." Donnelly's smile faltered. "Excuse me? You signed off on his corruption report, the one that exposed manipulation of patrol patterns." His face froze, just for a second, then he regained composure. "Miss Daniels, those reports were baseless. Your father was under stress, emotional. Sometimes good men make mistakes." Alyssa's voice was ice. "He wasn't mistaken. He was murdered. And the man who gave the order worked for you." Donnelly stood slowly. "You're accusing the chief of police of conspiracy? Be very careful, young lady." Alyssa rose, meeting his height. "Careful is what got my father killed." He turned away, walking to the window. "You know, your father was difficult. Always asking questions that didn't need answers. Sometimes, when people dig too deep, they find things they can't handle." She studied him, the tone, the shift in voice, the quiet arrogance beneath the mask. Then she smiled faintly. "Thank you, Chief." He frowned. "For what?" "For confirming everything I needed." There was a soft click from her wrist, a hidden recorder. Donnelly's face turned pale. "You," but she was already walking out, calm and steady. "You should have learned, Chief. My father raised me to listen more than I speak." Outside, Carter and Miller were waiting in an unmarked car. Alyssa got in, placed the recorder on the dashboard, and pressed play. Donnelly's voice came through, sharp and clear. "Sometimes when people dig too deep, they find things they can't handle." Carter exhaled. "That's enough to open a federal inquiry." Miller grinned. "And enough to end a career." Alyssa stared out the window as the sirens began to rise in the distance, heading toward police headquarters. Her voice was quiet but full of fire. "He silenced my father to protect his empire. Now the whole world will hear him." Carter nodded, pride in his voice. "You did it, Alyssa." She shook her head. "Not yet. Not until the department apologizes publicly. Not until my father's name is cleared." Miller smiled softly. "Then let's finish it." Outside, storm clouds gathered again, but this time they didn't bring fear. They brought reckoning. The restaurant that once smelled of garlic bread and polished marble now reeked of tension. Every whisper, every clink of a spoon echoed louder than thunder. The air was thick, heavy with shame. At the center stood Rita, calm and composed in her black uniform, even after everything. Beside her, Vince, her husband, the very man everyone feared, but now saw through new eyes, stood with his jacket still unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up. His calmness was more terrifying than his anger. Across the floor, Calvin, the manager who once dragged her into that bathroom, sat slumped on a chair, face pale, lips trembling. His once slick hair hung messily across his forehead. The arrogance that filled every corner of his voice was gone. All that remained was the quiet sound of breathing, the kind that comes when someone finally realizes they've lost everything. "Mr. Lawson," Vince said softly, stepping closer. Calvin lifted his eyes, full of fear. Vince didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. "I built this restaurant for people who respect people," Vince said, voice steady as a blade. "You disrespected my wife, my staff, my values, and now you'll never set foot here again." Calvin opened his mouth to plead, but Vince raised a finger. "Save it," he whispered. "The cameras saw everything. The board already knows. The police are on their way." The crowd of employees, once too afraid to move, now looked up. Their eyes followed Vince, then turned to Rita. For the first time, they saw her not as just a waitress, but as something untouchable. Rita's voice came, soft but sharp. "Do you know what hurts the most, Calvin?" she asked. He looked up, unable to speak. "It's not the way you grabbed my arm. It's not the words you said. It's how everyone else saw it and stayed quiet." Her gaze moved across the room. The waiters, the hostess, even the cook who peeked from the kitchen froze. "But silence," she continued, "isn't loyalty. It's fear dressed as respect." One of the younger waiters swallowed hard, tears welling up. Another quietly took off his apron and stepped beside Rita. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the staff stood behind her, no longer employees, but witnesses reclaiming their voice. Vince turned to his head of security. "Escort Mr. Lawson out," calmly. Two men approached, professional but firm. They lifted Calvin by the arms. He didn't resist. He just stared at Rita, ashamed, small, defeated. As he was led out, a hush fell over the restaurant. The sound of his shoes scraping the floor was the only reminder of the power he once thought he had. Outside, the night was cool. Rain started to fall, pattering gently on the glass windows. Rita watched him disappear into the storm, then closed her eyes. Vince stepped closer. "You good?" he asked quietly. She nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, I'm good." He slipped his arm around her. "You sure you still want to keep this place open?" Rita looked around the tables, the staff, the faces that now held courage instead of fear. "Oh, we're keeping it open," she said. "But from now on, we serve more than food, we serve respect." Everyone clapped softly. Not the loud, forced applause of an audience, but the real kind, the one that comes from hearts that understand. Rita turned to the young hostess who once avoided her eyes. "You're on shift lead next week," she said gently. The girl gasped, smiling through tears. "Me?" "Yes. Start by fixing that old bathroom door. Nobody deserves to feel trapped again." They both laughed lightly. The tension broke, replaced by the warmth of healing. As the camera of the mind pulls back, the lights in the restaurant glow golden. Rain streaks the windows, soft piano music plays faintly, and Rita's calm smile fills the screen. Then, as the final shot lingers on the empty table where Calvin once sat, her voice echoes strong, wise, and unforgettable. Sometimes justice doesn't need noise. It just needs courage. And silence that finally ends. Cut to black. A single raindrop hits the window. The restaurant sign flickers softly in the night. "Respect is served here."